Hi everyone. Hello, it's Stella here. I'm really happy to be here with you all. I am your Empress expert for the week, and I am tuning in from a super hot Glastonbury and UK. So let me know if you tune in live. Let me know where you are in the world. And any questions you have at any point, also feel free to ask them. And I'll make sure I get back to those. So I'm beaming in today. It's our first day. If you saw my last post, hi Stacy. Hello. I'm really happy to be here. It's been a while since I did a Facebook Live, so I'm a little bit, okay, let's arrive together. But thank you for bearing with me. And so if you saw my last post, which was about day one, I was speaking about the tip of the iceberg, like the whole iceberg of women's food and body image issues, and saying that just the tip of the iceberg is about food, diet, and exercise. And then there is a whole big area beneath the surface that's everything else in there, yeah, and what really matters and what we don't often see. And so I want to speak a little bit more about that today in this live and see how you feel about that and what your experience has been with that. And I'm starting there today because this is one of the basic, like the fundamental principles that my own work is based on, which is all about, food and body freedom is an inside job. And it's something that I'm really passionate about because what I've experienced personally in the past when I struggled a lot, and what I see many other people struggling with, there is a very core misunderstanding, misperception, myth about what food and body image issues are and how we break free from them. And so anytime, generally speaking, culturally, personally, but anytime there is something going wrong, we struggle with something that has to do with food and body, our first thought, or our weight, our first thought is two things, diet and exercise. So changing the way we eat, the types of foods that we eat, the frequency, the amount, the calories, the, whatever. And that can range from the more typical or old-fashioned, if you want, like actual diets. And then it can go all the way to the more holistic, to the more spiritual, to the more nutritional approaches, sort of a thing. And that's not that those things are bad. It's how you use them. And if we come from a diet mentality, then this is how we're going to use anything, no matter how healthy or balanced it might be. Okay, and so this is the first thing that we think about. Okay, I need to change my diet, I need to take things out, I need to add things in, I need to, implement any changes in this area. And then also changing and implementing changes in exercise and how much exercise we do, how often, the type, the discipline that we have in doing it, and all of that. So these are those two areas that we focus on. And even though we know that, like statistically speaking, 90 something, I'm not even sure, % of diets fail, which means that dieters end up gaining all the weight that they have lost through the diet back, and then some more. And even though there's so many of us, and myself included, that have subscribed in huge, like long memberships in gyms and all of that, never actually used them, we still, thank you for the hearts and for the likes, we still go back to the same approaches. Like no matter how many times we have failed, or those approaches have failed us, and that's a big difference right there, we still go back to work on those. And then especially if they have failed us, especially if they have been unsuccessful attempts, then we go back and we try even harder. and we set even harder and stricter rules, and then we diet even more and even more intensely anyway. And we keep trying and we keep trying and we keep trying, and a huge percentage, especially of women, are stuck in that cycle forever. Yeah, they never actually break free from that cycle, and it really pains me, because you can actually spend a whole lifetime in that space believing that there is something wrong with you. There is something wrong, there is something wrong with you. There is something wrong with your willpower, your self-discipline. You're like, you just don't have it. You don't deserve it. Your genes, you're like, whatever it is. But like, stay there forever. And one of the reasons that we stay there is because, as I said, we focus so much time, so much energy, so much money on that tip of the iceberg. And so whatever changes we see through that are bound to be very short-term covers. They are bound to not be lasting, because we never go deep down to the root of the issue. Yeah. Which is everything that I placed in that bottom of that iceberg. But in a nutshell, it's all... Yep. Thank you. Yes. So everything that I placed on that bottom of the iceberg is what's beneath the surface. It's where the root causes of what we're struggling with in terms of food and body are to be found. And shortly, in a nutshell, it's like our relationship with food and body very, very accurately reflects an accurate reflection of our relationship with ourself and of our whole lives. Yeah, so every area of our life and our general patterns and our history and the roles that we play in life and what we have gone through, all of that is something that we carry. And all of that affects our relationship with food and body. And then I've been very quite fascinated about why we never go there. Why there is, not only we don't go there, but there is a lot of resistance in people to actually dive deep and go there. And I'd love to hear from you also, like, if you haven't done any deeper work, any inner work around that, I'd love to hear why. I have kind of thought of 3 different reasons, or maybe more, we'll see. One is that we're generally very afraid to shift our attention inwards. Yeah, it's easier, or it feels easier, it feels more comfortable to focus on the outside and to work there, even if we have to work over and over and over again. Yeah, for some reason it feels easier. And I do understand that. Yeah, and I want to bring a lot of compassion to that, and it doesn't mean to say that this is wrong. Let's try to understand together why this might be. And turning inward can be scary. Yeah, especially if you haven't tuned in a very long time. And it's like instinctively, I think we all know when there is a lot going on inside that we have suppressed, that we have buried, that we haven't wanted to look at. And so even more or less consciously, we know that there is a lot down there, and we fear going down there. Yeah. The other thing is that nobody really teaches us how. We don't really we get raised and we grow up, and everybody teaches us how. There is so much teaching and lessons and messages from everywhere about what to do with food and what not to do with food, how to exercise, how much to exercise, what is good, what is bad. All of that is so much out there. But then what do you do with yourself? What you do with your emotions? What you do with your thoughts? What would you do with your soul, with your needs, with your desires, with all of that? This is not something that anybody really teaches us growing up, especially for us I don't know if it's any different these days, but especially from my generation at least, and the next one, I don't think that anyone really teaches that. Yeah, so we actually don't know how to do it. And I think even the concept that there is inside work, internal work to be done when it comes to food and body, I think it's also quite recent. It's also quite new. It's new knowledge that it's so much related to our psychology. Yeah. And then the other thing I think is also about our mind feeling much more comfortable working with something tangible and measurable, such as food and calories and all of that, or exercise, or like inches and kilos and all of that. It's much easier, or it feels much easier. It's much more manageable at the beginning for our mind to deal with that, and then everything else, all that is at the bottom of the iceberg. And again, I'd love to hear how, like, when you look at that iceberg, what's your reaction to that? It can feel quite a lot and sometimes intimidating for people. Yeah, and so one of the reasons is this, that our mind is much better, much more comfortable dealing with the specifics. And then when it comes to the inner world, it can feel too vague, too out of control, too much to take. Yeah, and that's why also doing emotional work, I don't think that anyone is supposed to do it on their own. Yeah, especially at the beginning. Yeah. The last thing I want to say on that is what I've also seen, because I work with eating disorders as well. That was my initial work. It was in the field of eating disorders as a psychotherapist only and all of that, and then it evolved into coaching and healing and more psychospiritual work. But then I've realized that we have now an understanding that people who struggle with eating disorders do need to do inner work to break free from that, to recover from that, right? But it's almost like there is a huge gap between eating disorders that are one extreme and then everyone else who doesn't have a clinical eating disorder but does struggle with food and body. It's almost like in our heads, it's a very different, very separate, two very separate areas. And they're actually not separate at all. Yeah, it's just a more extreme manifestation of the exact same issues. But it's just like this thing that's been turned on, the volume has been turned on in that. And it's not a coincidence, I think, that very often people who have eating disorders and go through therapy and recover, they end up having a much healthier relationship than people who had never had an eating disorder but are just, regular, I don't know, whatever term I'm supposed to use, but they end up having a healthier relationship just because they have gone in and done this work. Yeah. So this is something I'm really passionate about making it very clear that inner work and soul work and psychological work and emotional work and spiritual work and all of that, and body-based work, somatic work, embodiment work, is equally important for anyone who struggles with an eating disorder and anyone who doesn't but struggles with food and weight in their bodies. They are exactly the same. And it's also one of the reasons and the misunderstandings that kind of hold people back from doing that. They don't think that they have something serious enough to look for, right? Isn't it? To look for emotional support. There's something that I want to go into next that's about how we see food and body image issues. And there's two ways to see them from my perspective, many ways probably, but two ways I want to focus on. And one is that food and weight and body image issues are a problem, an obstacle to happiness, an obstacle to joy, an obstacle that comes in our ways and makes our lives so difficult and holds us back from having that body and appearance that equals success or equals happiness or all of that. And it's just an obstacle that comes in the way, and we need to get rid of as soon, as fast as possible, as quickly as possible. Yeah. And that's why we respond to it in a very aggressive way. Like, let's get it out of the way now, yesterday. Yeah, let's punish myself. Let's make myself work as hard as possible. And that leads into that cycle that we were speaking about at the beginning. And then there is a very different way that I've come to see food and body image issues as, and it is as an invitation and an initiation as well, especially for women. And from my perspective, it's like an invitation from your soul, from the universe, from whatever you want to call it. But it's like, from your psyche even. Yeah, it's an invitation to go in, to turn inwards and face all those things that we have avoided and we have run from our whole lives. And it is an initiation that takes us deep into ourselves and deep into our bodies as well. And it calls us in to go into the depth, see what is there, get to know ourselves so intimately, shed so many skins like snakes, and evolve and develop and get to a place where our freedom is true and it is our own and it is unconditional and it's not based on anybody else's rules but our own. Especially for women, I feel that it's like a call to be initiated into a more evolved and mature version of yourself. Yeah, and I often use these archetypes. It's the call to move, to transition from the princess archetype that needs other people's approval, that needs to be pleasing, that needs to earn, that needs to be pretty and silent and nice and needs to be chosen by the prince. And so all of her power is outside herself. Yeah, and everything that matters is her appearance and her manners. To the queen. To the queen who is responsible for herself and is sovereign in herself, and all her power comes from herself, and she just chooses herself. That sounds it can sound very easy. It's a very deep process, and that's why it can't be a quick fix. Yeah, and I've become over time, very clear in my work about that this is not a quick fix. And if you desire a quick fix, then I'm not the right person to work with. Yeah, at the beginning, I was trying to make it sound like it is a quick fix and I've got the big solution and the answer to everything. But no, it's actually very deep work, and I'm there to hold that space. But it takes other people's willingness as well, right? And so another archetype that I use also is that of the good girl, which is very similar to the princess. It's along the same lines, a good girl that follows the rules and doesn't cause trouble and doesn't make a mess and just follows what she's told. To the wild or to the whole woman, and I think they both they complement each other very well, or they're really very much together. And that's super important when it comes to food and body, because a large part of healing our relationship with food and body is about reclaiming that wildness of the body and of the animal body. This is an animal body, right, that we're in. And it knows so well, just like animals, They don't need anybody's guidance or anybody's diet books or anybody's, like, nothing, to know what and how much they need to eat and how much they need to run and move in nature. Yeah, and so we are the same. But because of so much conditioning and because of so much living and acting from the head and from external knowledge, we forget that and we disconnect from that. So it's actually, I'm so glad. Thank you. So it's actually about that. It's about going deep and reclaiming that and setting it free. And this is what takes us outside of that shell of the very constricting shell of the good girl and unleashes that wild whole woman. And it's also a journey of reclaiming many different parts. These are like 2-4 of the main archetypes that I hold in my mind and that I use. But the journey is really about reclaiming many different parts of ourselves that we have buried along the way because we have been told or we have been shown that they were bad, that they were too much, that they were not enough, that they were all of those stories that we hold. Yeah, that's why I was saying in the iceberg that it's really a lot, so much about the stories that we hold that have come out of our experiences in life, and we need to revisit that and challenge that and rewrite the story and process and heal, bring healing to those places, to those experiences, to those unresolved experiences. And it is also so much about emotions. From my perspective, it's like emotions and how we connect with them, also with a more human aspect of our nature and of our bodies. They are at the very core of food and body image issues. Yeah. Deep breath. I want to hear if you have any questions at all, and I'd love to answer them. Otherwise, I'll slowly bring that to a close for now. Let me know if you have any questions, and if you're watching that on the replay, also please feel free to post your questions beneath the video, and I'll come back and answer them. Yeah, and they can be, questions that have to do with what I'm saying, or any questions that you have about that inner work that we do with food and body issues. And I also want to mention that, like, for anyone who feels overwhelmed by the bottom of the iceberg, it's not necessary. Like, it's you're so welcome. I'm glad it makes sense and it's useful. So for anyone who feels overwhelmed by that, that bottom part of the iceberg, I want to say it's not necessary. It's going to be different things for everybody and different needs to work with specific elements more than others, and different deepening processes in every one of them. But definitely it's not about a quick fix. Yeah, and also I want to say that from my perspective, again, food and body image issues are just one way. They're one of the symptoms. Right? They're one of the symptoms that are calling us in, but it can manifest in any way. It can manifest through alcohol or substance abuse. It can manifest as relationship issues or anxiety or depression. Like, whatever the symptom is, my perspective, my view is that it's about the same calling. So if you do go in and go and do that inner work, it's not only going to take you into a place of freedom around food and body, it's going to have an impact, and it's going to be a full, all-round transformation on all levels of your life. Yeah. Okay. And so I am gonna close with one invitation that I actually, in terms of the iceberg, please feel free to go back, see what calls to you, what areas you have realized that are calling for your attention and that you need to go deeper into. Or if you would add anything else, I'd love to hear that. And my invitation is, if all of us kind of withdrew half of the energy that we spend on the outside, on diet and exercise, or even thoughts about these things, and redirected it to the inside, there is nothing else that you have to do. Half of that energy, and it's going to be a huge transformation. Yeah, it's going to take you to that place inside that you desire to be so much faster than anything that has to do with the outside. Okay, I will close here. Thank you so much for watching, and I really look forward to seeing you and interacting with you and connecting in the group. So much love.